Parshas ki Savo. This week's Parsha begins with a description of the mitzvah of Bikurim, supplemented a bit by additional detail that the Mishnah describes. What would happen is a farmer who's growing one of the 7 species that are notable about Eretz Yisrael, about the land of Israel. They are Chitas, Ora, Gefen, Teno, Rimon, Zayas, and Tamar. That is wheat, barley, grapes, figs, pomegranates, olives, and dates. So a farmer who produces one or more of these species goes to his field at the beginning of the season of the ripening of the fruits, and he notices which fruits have ripened first, ties a band around them, waits for them to fully ripen, puts them in a basket, takes them to Jerusalem, gives them to the Kohen, and makes a declaration. And his declaration is very well known to us because it forms the backbone of the Hagada on Pesach, which is, it says now here, I'm on verse 26, Perek Chavav Pasuk Hey, that's chapter 26, verse 5. V'nisav amarta lifnei Hashem elkecha, you should raise your voice loudly and say to, before God, this is after the Kohen has taken the basket that you filled with your fruits. Arami oved avi, familiar terms, familiar words. Arami oved avi, vayir mitzrayim alev v'yagasham b'mseima'at, v'yisham l'goy gadol etzum harav. My father was an Aramean, tried to destroy my father. That's a frequent interpretation, referring to Lavan, the Aramean, or a wandering Aramean was my father. In any event, we describing the precursors to the descent to Egypt. We were in Egypt. Vayanunu, vayitnu aleinu avodah kasha. They oppressed us. They gave us difficult work. We cried out, and eventually God took us out with miracles and wonders, and He brought us to this place, a land flowing with milk and honey. And now I have brought the beginning of the fruits of the land, and you place it before Hashem, meaning in the temple, and you bow down and you rejoice with all of the good that God gave you. So it's a notable declaration that here somebody who's been in the land perhaps for generations is describing still the descent by our ancestors, by his ancestors, into the land of Egypt, and the redemption from Egypt and the bringing to the land. And that is all a build-up, the rabbis say, as an expression of our hakaras hatov, our expression of thanks. Now, there's a little bit of a problem here, which is the verse that we did not read is Gimel, which is 3. It says it says you fill up your basket and you bring it to the place that Hashem has chosen, which is an allusion to the Mikdash, whether it's the Mishkan or the Mikdash, whether it's the tabernacle or the temple. This is where you bring it. And you come, Uvasa el kohen asher yeh b'yamim ha'em, you come to the Kohen who will be in those days. And the rabbis ask the question and answer. We won't go into it now. What is who will be in those days? You obviously can't time travel and go to a different Kohen, something to be addressed at a different time. V'amarta elav, and you tell him, Higadati hayom, and this is what we're going to focus on. Higadati hayom L'Hashem Elokecha. Now we're going to read from 2 different translations, and they both basically say the same thing. I declare today to Hashem your God. This is talking to the Kohen, and they say, why does he say your God instead of our God? And the commentaries point out that it's a way of speaking with honor and respect to a Kohen or to a Navi. You say your God. Okay. Kivasi, what's the declaration? I declare, Kivasi ela artz asher nishba Hashem la'avosenu la'asaslanu. I have come to the land that God has promised to our fathers to give us. So the declaration is, I have come to the land. So we have a substantive problem, which is he may not have come to the land, he may have been born in the land. We alluded to that earlier. I read from the Art Scroll translation. Now I'm going to read from the Koran translation, which is very similar. And he says, go to place, and you shall go to the priest that shall be in those days and say to him, I profess this day to the Lord your God, I have come to the country that the Lord swore to our fathers. Okay, so one says one says I declare, and the other says I profess. There's a problem, which is that the Hebrew word that both of these notable translations are translating is higadati. Higadati is I have told. I said. It's lashon avar. It's past tense. And the translations are skirting around this problem of tense in the word higadati. Higadati means I have told. So there are those commentaries who say that it's lashon hove bilashon avar, that it's using a perhaps poetic form of describing the present tense by using a past tense. There are several Meforshim, however, that understand this literally. I have declared, I have professed. Where is that declaration? I have already, and what's the sense of saying, I have already professed? Higadati, I have professed, hayom, today. Lashem elokecha, kibasi el haaretz, that I came to the land, asher nishba Hashem lavosinu losas lanu, that Hashem has promised to our fathers to give to us. What is the sense of I have declared? So there are many Meforshim. It's implicit in the Ramban, the Savo, the Malbim, Aznayim Latorah, which is a more recent publication by Rav S, that we're actually not talking about Hagada here. Hagada is the form of declaration, which is not in the word higadati, which is not words, but it's actions. In other words, by taking the fruits, putting them in a basket, and making the trek to Jerusalem, to the temple, and placing them before the Kohen, what's happening is those actions are a declaration. They are a demonstration. Why is the farmer coming to Jerusalem with a basket of fruits? What he's saying is, I'm paying my obligation. I'm satisfying my obligation. That derives from what? It derives from my being the beneficiary of God's fulfilling his promise to our forefathers to give us this land. And it's in this context that the farmer continues and talks about how the brief history of the Bnei Israel, the children of Israel, as they went to Egypt and then were redeemed and then eventually were led into the land of Israel. But the declaration is a demonstration, which is simply the act of bringing the bikurim, of bringing these fruits. Now, if we think of the word Hagada, we think of Hagada Shel Pesach, which, not coincidentally, as we mentioned earlier, that this declaration, the second declaration here, with the verbal declaration, forms the backbone of the Hagada, which is Arami Oved Avi, and declaring the redemption from Egypt amidst miracles and wonders. And that's also the language of Haggadah. And there is also demonstration at the Haggadah, at the night of Pesach. It's not just words. We do have words. We have Derech She'elo Tshuva, we have Manishtana, we have lots of words, but we also have demonstrations. We break the middle matzah. We drink 4 cups of wine. We eat bitter herbs. We dip them. We dip karpas in salt water. We dip the bitter herbs in charoses. We recline. We lean. We do all kinds of things that symbolize freedom and other things that symbolize oppression. It's a night of demonstration. And the point here is that Haggadah can be in words and it can be in actions. And sometimes our actions actually speak louder than words. And this is in the halachos of Pesach. The requirement is, and there's a difference of opinion between the Ramban and others, whether it's chayav adam liros es atzmo, a person is obligated to see himself as though he left Egypt, or, according to the language of the Ramban, in Hilchos Chametz Matzah, he says laharos es atzmo. Person is obligated to show himself, to act as though he has just left Egypt. In other words, to demonstrate with the various devices that we use at the Pesach Seder. But the bottom line is, we're not just talk. We're about action as well. And we're entitled to make declarations. We're commanded to make declarations through our actions. And we're entitled to derive messages of both the oppression and the slavery and the exile and the redemption through our actions, to communicate those messages, because those messages are essential to our having an adequate sense of hakaras hatov, of an expression of thanks. That expression of thanks does not extend only to our words, but also to our actions, because in many cases, actions speak louder than words. Have a good Shabbos.